Hello and welcome to Not Your Typical Sunday School at St. Mark's Episcopal Church in LaGrange, Georgia. My name is Alan Pruitt. I am the rector of this church, and today I am delighted to welcome our Bishop Rob Wright, the Bishop of Atlanta, who is going to be exploring our three questions with us. Who is God? Who are we? And what is God inviting or challenging us to do in this reading? He's going to be looking at today's reading from the Gospel according to Matthew and then exploring those questions. So I hope you enjoy his exploration, and first, I'll offer the reading for you. The Pharisees went and plotted to entrap Jesus in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. Again, today I'm grateful to welcome our Bishop, Rob Wright, and I hope you enjoy his exploration of our three questions.
Hi, St. Mark's. This is Bishop Wright here. I am on my front porch in Marietta, Georgia, and so grateful for this opportunity to talk a little bit about Scripture with you. Thanks to Alan, who's invited me to join you as you engage Bible study in this creative fashion. I understand that Alan has already read to you the lesson that I have chosen, which is Matthew 22:15 through 22. That's Matthew, the 22nd chapter, 15 through 22. By now in the gospel, as a brief setup, by now in the gospel, Jesus has made himself known. He is preaching and teaching and telling stories that are causing people to think, causing some people to rejoice, and causing other folks to be defensive. Some other people are seeing themselves as being threatened by the news that he's preaching, where there's room at dinner tables for all kinds, and where the fancy religious people like myself aren't the most honored guests, that God is biased towards the poor and the sick and the left out, the child and the sick and the female, those who had been sort of pushed to the periphery. And so we find ourselves in this story here. It starts off with the Pharisees, that is, again, the religious folks, the sort of cradle clergy, if you will. People who have been clergy for generations. Now they're looking for a way to trap him in his own words. He's a nuisance. He's a rabble-rouser. Crowds are gathering to hear his radical teaching, and they need to get rid of him. He's a scandal. And so they're hoping to ensnare him in his own words. And so, of course, they don't try to do it on sort of religious means necessarily, but they want to know about how he understands himself to be living with Caesar, the empire, the government. And so how they ask him a question is supposed to lead him into making a huge mistake where he says something negative about the government, and therefore they can hand him over to the authorities. And so the first question, of course, is who is God in this text? And so in this text, God is, of course, Jesus among us, Emmanuel, the one who loved us enough to walk with us. And so Jesus is God in this story, and by telling stories of love and inclusion and embrace, he is confounding the status quo. So here we have a clear idea of who God is, and God is not the status quo. God is not going to honor the arrangements between the religious folks and the governmental folks. So God is that one in Jesus who is telling stories so that people can find liberation, emancipation at the very least, so that people can discern what is of this world and what is godly. And so they try to flatter him first, and so God is not one who can be bought off by flattery. Maybe that's a note to us. God is not the one that we can sort of beg and kiss up to, suck up to, and then and then give us our heart's desire. God is immune to flattery. That's what this story says. Jesus sees right through it, gets right to the point. And so that's the big thing. And then God is in this story someone who gives us an answer that redirects our thinking altogether. God is the one who gives an answer that proves that sometimes you and I ask questions that are way too small. Questions that really are a bit selfish sometimes and distracted and too worldly, too temporal, and not nearly eternal enough. And so Jesus is that one who takes that question that we present and reframes it. And this is so in our life with God. Who are we in the text? Well, we can be all kinds of folks in the text. We can be the Pharisees who are looking to evade and circumvent God, take the edge off of Jesus. We do that sometimes. We want to take the edge off of Jesus's clear ideas about what a faithful life looks like, and they do that here. We can suck up, as I have said, to God, anything to give God rather than what God has asked us for, which is fidelity, which is to enlarge our hearts, which is to love neighbor, which is to be generous, which is to forgive, which is to be about the business of reconciliation, which is about the business of looking and living differently than the world. So we are those people who resist that. We want our cake and eat it too. We want relationship and intimacy with God, but we want it on our own terms. That's what's happening here. We want to constrain Jesus. We want to keep his floor height low. And so, of course, the invitation then is that Jesus sort of threads this needle beautifully, doesn't he? He says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. And so you and I are then forced. As one person has said, you and I in a life with Jesus are not to major in minors. And sometimes this can be true as we talk about politics and as we talk about the world as it is. Sometimes we can, given the energy that we give those subjects, we can act like those subjects are really ultimate. And so it seems like this text is inviting us to think about what is of Caesar and what is of God in our life. And to not get those two things confused. I think that what God is about, clearly in lots of other texts, is how we live with neighbor, about always being curious about who God is and wanting to give God something. I think that's that last bit. It's this invitation to give, but not only sort of to give the coin in the story, but to give what is precious. And so there are things in this world that we have to give that are precious, our time, our labor, etc. We give that in exchange. But then there are other things that are precious, and that is our mind, our soul, our strength, our heart. And so this is what God requires from us. And God will not be bought off by the little dances that you and I do, and not in a hurtful way, a condemning way, but there's always this open hand reaching out to us, this invitation that you and I would leave some of the silliness of this world and run to the one who loves us and who wants to make us free. God bless you. Take good care, St. Mark's. See you soon.
I hope you enjoyed Bishop Wright and his exploration of our 3 questions. And so now I invite you to go and explore those questions for yourself, either alone or with your group. Who is God? Who are we? And what is God inviting or challenging us to do in this reading?